This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the best way to create your website. It's often said that cinematography is like painting with light. I'd say this is especially true in the work of French cinematographer Bruno Delbonnel. His approach to photography is painterly and stylized, rather than being strictly naturalistic. He's never afraid to bend the rules of realism for emotional or symbolic effect. Let's use this video to unpack his work by looking at his approach to cinematography, as well as breaking down some of the gear and techniques he uses to achieve those images. If you go through some of Delbonnel's earlier work, particularly with director Jean-Pierre Jeunet on films like A Very Long Engagement or Amélie, what immediately stands out is his expressionistic use of color. The palette is an affirmation that the images are not reality, but rather a cinematic world unto itself. They lean into a stylized, unnatural hue. For example, in some scenes, hair may have a green tinge to it, or in others, paler skin tones may skew into orange tones. However, these hues are not monochromatic. Although they have a tint to them, there is still a separation with other colors. Images with a green cast still have reds, yellows, blues, and other tones. This use of color isn't arbitrary and usually connects back to the story in some way. For example, A Very Long Engagement divided the palette of the film, using warmer tones to depict the world in times of peace and cooler colors when shooting the wartime trench scenes. While Inside Llewyn Davis stuck to a single palette and looked for the whole movie, using desaturated cool tones to reflect the melancholic, sad, wintry feeling that was in the script. He used a similar idea when photographing Harry Potter, shooting emotionally darker or tense moments with cooler tones, or in some cases an almost black and white monochromatic look, while saving warmer autumn tones for emotionally lighter scenes. However, this isn't to say that all of his work carries the same style of palette. For some stories, or when working for directors who have a particular look in mind, such as Wes Anderson, the palette conformed a lot more to their style, taking on more saturation and a truer reproduction of color with more natural skin tones. Ultimately, his job is to create images which translate the vision of the director to the screen. Another factor which makes Delbonnel's work stand out is his lighting, which I think can be characterized by two things: it's soft and its high contrast. This lighting creates a visual language which feels very similar to a Baroque painting. These artworks often have a strong single light beam that comes from one side, which illuminates characters and leaves the rest of the frame in shadow. Heavy contrast. He avoids using frontal light sources which are placed behind the camera and directly face the character, as they tend to spill onto the background of the shot and flatten out faces. Like the feathered brush strokes in Baroque art, the light he uses isn't sharp and crisp, but rather soft, beautiful, and gentle on the skin. The light gradually falls off into shadow. This soft, high contrast technique can be seen in much of his work, such as Dark Shadows, Inside Llewyn Davis, Harry Potter, and The Tragedy of Macbeth. This softness evokes a feeling of memory and subjectivity, which may romanticize the story or past in period films, give the footage a slightly magical feeling, or in other contexts may make it feel like the character is passing through the world in a dreamy daze. The interplay between brighter and darker scenes is another feature of his work. As he says, "For me it's as if the images are the melody in a musical score, moving with contrast between light and dark at different paces. Cinematography is about how you articulate the melody of the light." This idea can be seen in Darkest Hour, where in our introduction to Churchill the character emerges literally, and perhaps also thematically, from almost complete darkness into light. But what are some of the lighting, camera and grips gear that he uses to create this look? Before we get there, I need to thank my regular sponsor, Squarespace. As you should know by now, every filmmaker needs a way for your work to be recognized and viewed by clients, producers, directors, or fellow crew members online. I use Squarespace to set up separate sites, both for displaying my cinematography portfolio as well as for posting videos and articles related to this channel. Their design intelligence allows you to customize a website specifically for your needs and create a bespoke online presence. I keep my sites very minimal so that the work is the focus, but you can also choose from a range of other customizable design options which work best for your portfolio or business. Squarespace makes it easy to upload your work through beautiful video pages or display some images of what you can do using their gallery tool. Check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch your site, go to squarespace.com/indepthcine to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Although, as we've established, Delbonnel does switch up his style based on the content of the story, when it comes to selecting lenses, he has a fairly consistent methodology. He almost always favors wide-angle lenses. When shooting with Super 35 cameras, he'll usually select a spherical lens in a focal length in approximately the 14mm to 32mm range. These shorter focal lengths give a more exaggerated, distorted perspective with a deeper depth of field than telephoto lenses. He feels that this increased perspective heightens the three-dimensional feeling, especially when the camera moves, and keeps more of the background visible behind the character, which contextualizes them in the space. For example, when photographing Audrey Tautou on a very long engagement, he felt the best focal length for her face was either a 25mm or a 27mm, with an 18mm being a bit too distorted, especially when combined with the low angle shots favored by the director, and a 35mm lens a little too long. Likewise, in his work with the Coen brothers, both Inside Llewyn Davis and Buster Scruggs were almost entirely shot with a 27mm lens. Like his consistency in focal lengths, he also consistently chooses the same brand of spherical prime lenses, Cooke, specifically the Cooke S4s. He likes their warmth and what he calls their roundness, and has used the set on many films such as A Very Long Engagement, Dark Shadows, Darkest Hour, Harry Potter, and The Phoenician Scheme. He mostly uses Super 35 cameras, but on Macbeth, which was shot with a large format camera and lenses, he selected the Cooke S7s. He has, however, sometimes broken this trend and used Ari Zeiss Master Primes on The Ballad of Buster Scruggs and Disclaimer, which he co-DP'd with Emmanuel Lubezki. He'll usually pair his prime lens set with a convenient zoom lens, either an Angenieux Optimo zoom like a 70 to 80mm, or the 24 to 290mm if a long telephoto lens shot is required, or a Fujinon Allura 18 to 85 or 45 to 250mm. An example of when he uses a zoom occurred in The Woman in the Window for extreme close-ups on Amy Adams' eyes. When shooting such a tight shot, he finds using a zoom lens easy to quickly make small adjustments to the frame, than using a macro lens with a fixed focal length and adjusting the position of the actor millimeters left, right, backwards or forwards to adjust the frame. In the past, he used to use filters to manually get either the color or level of diffusion in the right place or as close as he could, such as using an 81 EF filter to give frames a bluish tint with a green fill. However, with modern post-production tools, he prefers to shoot without any effects filters in front of the lens and rather fine-tune any of these adjustments in post with his colorist, often Peter Doyle, using Baselight software. For example, creating a very restricted color palette with a very specific gamma and contrast, as well as adding a softening or diffusion layer using grading software. We've mentioned his soft but high contrast painterly lighting. The key to, his key light is using strong high output light sources and placing them as far away from the actors as possible. Then passing that light through a diffusion material like a grid cloth or through a diffusion gel on a frame, as can be seen in some behind the scene photos. The more powerful and further away a light source is, the more it can be softened and diffused. Think of the sun's far off rays passing through a cloud and how that big light in the sky gets beautifully softened on overcast days. Some of Delbonnel's large key sources include Dinos or large HMIs. For one scene in Darkest Hour, he fired 17 Arri Max 18Ks through the 17 windows of a corridor in Buckingham Palace. Like much of his other work, this encouraged the actor to pass through different areas of light and dark, creating his contrasting melody of light. To get more contrast on one side of the face, he likes to key from the side and uses minimal if any fill light on the other side of the face. He also sometimes combines one of these high output sources, placed as a backlight behind a camera, with haze to create hard silhouettes. A final stylistic flourish which characterizes Delbonnel's work is an aversion to handheld. In most of the movies he shoots, shots are locked on interesting compositions which often feature either low or high angles. Or the camera maintains a fluid, smooth motion, with the camera usually operated with a geared head or wheels. Whether that's from a Steadicam, a dolly, or one of his favorite tools, a techno crane with a stabilized head, which can be used to do sweeping, floating movements. The small stable eye is his stabilized head of choice, which can be fitted to a crane, a helicopter or drone for aerial footage, or even used handheld by an operator in special circumstances, such as tracking down a very narrow corridor. These floating movements, soft high contrast light, and an unconventional color palette all effectively pushes images away from pure naturalism and into a heightened cinematic world all of its own. What are some of your favorite movies which Delbonnel shot? Thank you to all of you for supporting the channel, especially those on Patreon. Otherwise, until next time, thanks for watching and goodbye.